Our first speaker today is Emily Squires, an honors program senior studying psychology and English, and Emily's talk is entitled, When Belonging Binds, the Hidden Costs of Collective Narcissism. Thank you, Emily.
Narcissism is harmful. Those who write about our culture lament the rise of individual narcissism, which amplifies the dogmatic individualism central to Western culture. At some point, we have all cringed or smiled at self-centered people around us who don't understand that reality includes more than the events of their own lives. Sometimes, we confront these traits within ourselves, which none of us is entirely free from. The name for this psychological condition originates from the ancient myth of Narcissus, the most beautiful of mortals who sees his reflection in a lake. He becomes so enraptured with it that he falls in love with it, tries to kiss it, and thus dies by drowning. This famous image of narcissism, which many of us first call to mind when we think about narcissism, is nonetheless misleading. It turns out that narcissism can take many forms and turns out to be much more complex than we might at first think. An often overlooked character in the story of Narcissus is Echo, the nymph who loves Narcissus and tries to save him from his fate. However, she cannot save him because she is unable to speak. I believe Echo deserves to be discussed in her own right as a character in this story if we want to understand the lesson that it offers. More details will follow later, as Echo's story has much to teach us about more complex and nuanced forms of narcissism. For this talk, I will focus on a form of narcissism specifically called collective narcissism. Psychology and other social sciences have shown that narcissism is a complex trait with many facets. Contrary to popular belief, some forms relate to groups. One such form is called collective narcissism. Collective narcissism is defined as the belief and internalized attitude that one's in-group is better than other groups and deserves special treatment and recognition, which it often does not get. This type of thinking has been linked to many social issues, including sexism, racism, and others. Recently, social scientists across the Western world have also observed that collective narcissism is contributing to the rise of authoritarian ideals. Across the Western world, the past few decades have seen a rise in far-right populism that is not rooted in traditional conservatism nor liberalism, but in authoritarian thinking. This trend is concerning because of the harmful effects of authoritarianism on human rights and society's overall well-being. Recently, some researchers suggested that collective narcissism is a key factor fueling these new ideological movements. As a result, they have started exploring the link between collective narcissism and these global political shifts. Researcher Angela D'Souza, who studies collective narcissism, has identified several mechanisms that may explain how this trait relates to endorsing authoritarian ideals. She notes that collective narcissism tends to prioritize maintaining a socially, culturally, and politically uniform society. Within collectively narcissistic communities, the impulse to preserve the homogeneity of the in-group they identify with is strong, to the extent that any threat to that homogeneity is seen as a threat to the in-group's integrity and continued existence. When this sort of thinking is allowed to persist within groups, the consequences are disastrous, as homogeneity leads to a lack of diversity in ideas. This is concerning to social scientists because decreased ideological diversity has been shown to impair group decision-making skills. Homogeneous, collectively narcissistic groups are more likely to fall into groupthink and other judgment mistakes. When groupthink prevails, there is little resistance to accepting ideas that haven't been examined or challenged by dissent, which reduces both the number and quality of ideas. Therefore, collective narcissism harms group health by limiting creativity and decision-making skills. Like narcissists, those who are collective narcissists may struggle to hear the potentially life-saving cries of opposing views, which foster well-balanced evaluation of one's options for confronting complex situations. Being deaf to the ways of others might draw us out of the echo chambers of our own heads, as Echo attempted to do for Narcissist, which has potentially disastrous consequences for individuals and groups to which they belong. World War II furnishes a prime example of collective narcissism across multiple nations. Many social scientists point to World War II Germany as the most straightforward example of collective narcissism available from recent history. Nazi propaganda sought to instill within the German populace the idea that Aryan Germans were superior to other groups, were threatened by the encroaching presence of so-called alien groups, and needed to take quick and decisive action to ensure the recognition of their group's superiority. Inculcated with these beliefs, those who endorsed these ideas within the German populace were unwilling to challenge their ideals, actions, and behaviors because their in-group was collectively narcissistic. This subset of the German populace was blinded by groupthink and a lack of ideological diversity. Many actions taken by World War II Germany based upon groupthink were the impetus for some of the greatest violations of human rights remembered in human history. Millions of lives were lost, cultures and entire ways of life were threatened by this ideology. In today's world, there is speculation about how collective narcissism might appear in our own societies. In the United States, maintaining a homogeneous population to protect the economic interests of American-born citizens illustrates the role that collective narcissism plays in many aspects of American nationalist ideology, which is often based in ideals of American exceptionalism. Thus, we can see how holding on to ideas that promote values not related to patriotism or healthy attachment to national identity, but instead focus on binary notions of nationalism, can lead to increasingly emotionally driven thought aimed at protecting an in-group that one fears is constantly under threat. This sense of threat towards the in-group is widely accepted as a major variable that evokes intense emotional responses to other outgroups and provides an effective basis for viewing one's in-group as superior and deserving of special treatment. We see a similar phenomenon in individual narcissism, arising from overemphasis on the importance of self and an unhealthy attachment to identity. To understand the similarity, consider this form of unhealthy attachment being applied to a collective concept or group. For instance, this summer, as a participant in a summer undergraduate research fellowship, I was mentored by Dr. Budesheim, who directed the research we conducted into how national collective narcissism is predictive of prejudiced attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors towards immigrants. We found that national collective narcissism was predictive of harboring more negative attitudes towards immigrants when we asked participants to rate how they felt about immigrants. Interestingly, the research also found that national collective narcissists held a generally positive view towards legal immigrants but not towards illegal immigrants, indicating a fundamental aspect of American collective narcissism as tied to citizenship. Further, we found that national collective narcissists were predictably unlikely to support providing amnesty to illegal immigrants and were likely to support mass deportation measures. National collective narcissists were also more likely to harbor attitudes of fear and apprehension towards immigrants residing within their communities and the presence of immigrants in their lives more generally. When looking at these findings to analyze the practical application of the knowledge, it becomes clear how individual and collective narcissism relate to one another. Underlying individual narcissism is a sense of threat to one's safety and security, especially as it relates to identity. To compensate for this lack of sense of control and to protect one's sense of worth and validation, narcissists supply love, care, and validation to themselves, prompting overemphasis on their own importance. As I reach the end of this talk, I urge everyone to reflect on what the psychosocial phenomena that social scientists have studied recently reveal about us, and to consider how we might apply what we've learned from social science to our daily lives. It is easy to become captivated by our own narrow experiences and forget that billions of lived experiences exist outside of our own. When we allow ourselves to be captivated by our own narrow life experiences, we close ourselves off to all that we can learn from the lived realities of others. While most people are not likely to be raging narcissists of either the individual or collective kind, it is most certainly the case that each of us can benefit from taking time to reflect upon times in our lives when we have been closed-minded to someone else's experience and have lost something profoundly important in not taking the time to explore that which might be uncomfortable. Moments of the greatest discomfort in life are those that force us to mature the most. When we confront something new that might completely upend how we see reality and our deepest held beliefs about, everything, it is only natural to respond with apprehension. But if we have the strength to allow ourselves to be profoundly changed by those around us, with new ideas and attitudes towards various things, then our lives can be profoundly enriched through this challenging of even our core moral principles. Whether it serves to affirm what you believe, but opens your mind to new perspectives, or completely changes your worldview, it is certainly the case that you will be better for this experience. When our foundational attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors are challenged by experience, they reveal new ways of being that we might not have encountered otherwise, helping to expand a broader and more holistic worldview and enrich our life experiences. Ultimately, this makes us better people. Open engagement with others' views also strengthens communities as a diversity of voices ensures that narrow ways of thinking don't become entrenched systemically into societies. Having numerous cultural voices contribute to the running of a society will ensure that that society can be enriched by not only mitigating groupthink, but also by ensuring that social groups learn how to engage functionally in a manner based in humanity and humility. Ultimately, the strength that comes from not overemphasizing self or a particular group to which one belongs lies in an attentive generosity of mind that acknowledges what exists outside of ourselves and the things we happen to be attached to. So, the next time you have the chance to speak to someone you wouldn't normally talk to, or engage with something you would not normally engage with, consider how you might be able to learn simply not by feeling some sense of aversion when your sense of comfort is challenged, but something that might force a deep examination of yourself, as a narcissist of any kind might, but instead approach a situation with openness and perhaps even excitement. Let us challenge ourselves not to be like narcissists, and instead to listen to the voices of reason external to ourselves, which may challenge us and force us to grow, often with the best of consequences. Thank you.